Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome to Book Rank. Take 3. Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome to my channel. If this is the first time that you visited, hello, and if you have returned, hi again, and if you subscribed, this one's going to be a difficult one for me to record. It's about this book, but a lot more. Before I get to the book, I just want to speak to camera that I went through the dark night of the soul about 10 years ago now. It was 2014 up until 2016, and a way bit beyond that at times. And it was a very difficult period in my life. Now, it wasn't a nervous breakdown. It wasn't the black dog. It wasn't depression. What it was ego death. And I'm just going to take a drink. Ego death. Sounds strange, doesn't it? What is it? So I'd been brought up to believe that you should, as a man, get a job, get high up, earn money, get a house, get married, have kids. And a lot of that, I agree with. Well, I agreed with all of it. And I tried, despite working for some terrible companies, which I won't name, and going through 3 redundancies in a matter of 2 years in the mid-90s, and then changing countries, which is, a lot goes into that. That's quite stressful. And then continually moving houses and renting. By the time 2014 came along, we moved again. We're actually here now. We've been here more than 10 years. But I didn't have a job. We moved so my wife could work and I would do some relief work as a teacher. And in effect, that's what I did after about 26 onwards. Plenty of work. But in the 2 years leading up to that, I had no work. I was not bringing in any income. And what that does, it challenges your ego as a man, especially, well, I can only talk for myself, it would be the same for women. What is the point of life? Why? And I had to reevaluate everything about life. And I would lie there in bed. I remember looking up and thinking, why? Am I ever going to earn again? And it was hard work. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm glad I did. Because by the end, I was a different person. I even looked different. I looked at the world differently. And so what happens is that you're stripping away your ego and false sense of, inflated sense of worth. What does that mean? If you imagine that you get through to being 100 years old and you're on your deathbed, you're about to slip this mortal coil, or shuffle off this mortal coil, and you're still compos mentis, you can still think. What are you going to be thinking? Will you be thinking, if I only had spent 1 more hour at work? Or would you be thinking, damn, if only I'd been more of a dickhead? Or would you be thinking, was I a good, in my case, a good son, a good brother, a good husband, a good friend, a good father, and now a good grandfather? And by then, probably great-grandfather. Because I think that's what you really would be thinking. So everything else has no real worth, ultimately. And yet, we're told that's what you must pursue. So when you question that, you go into a dark place, and it's like a long tunnel, and the light is a long way away. 2 books helped me. Well, it's actually 3 books. I've got 2 here I can show you. I'm going to talk extensively about one of them. One I can't show you is Boethius's Consolations of Philosophy. That's elsewhere. But this helped me get through it, and I'll be talking about that later. And this one. But this is the one we're talking about. The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. I resisted this book. Ego, you see, it needed to be stripped away. I resisted this back in the early 2010s. Someone had recommended it to me, and I thought, no, something about the name, the prophet. I thought, no, although I love theology, I don't know, it's just something that I couldn't get to read. But I did join the Dark Knight, and I'm so glad I did. Because if you're like me, I thought, this would be for Muslims. It's Islam, isn't it? Isn't he from the Lebanon? And he was. But he was a Maronite Christian. He moved to the States in the late 1800s, Boston, I believe, and then he eventually ended up in New York and so on. And he wrote this, and ever since he's written this book, it's been very popular. And there you go. That's the author. I just realised the camera's back to front. So it's a very easy read. Very short chapters, probably 2 to 3 pages. And you get them like that. And what it is, it's about an old gentleman. He's actually named Al-Mustafa, the chosen and the beloved. And he'd spent or waited 12 years in the city of Orphalesa for his ship. And he's about to go off to the place of his birth. And the thumbnail for this shows you a gentleman imagined with the old 1920s tramp steamer. And I chose that image because generated on AI, good AI. It was first published in 1923. But he's a wise old man, and he has a series of people keep asking him, oh, please give us a bit more wisdom before you leave. And he does. And I read this, I went into it a bit skeptical. I didn't leave it that way. So, for instance, I'll just read a little bit out. And it's about children, because this is the one that really resonated with me at the time, because I was questioning my role as being a father. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, speak to us of children. And he said, and I'm just going to now not read all the way through, line for line. I'll skip some. It's the bits that I've highlighted. And he said, your children are not your children. And I read this when I was at the darkest depths of despond, probably. They come from you, but not from you. Okay, there's a potential metaphysical note there, even perhaps a religious one, but it's true, if you think about it. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may strive to be like them, but seek not, if only you could speak English, but seek not to make them like you. You are the bows from which, I was going to say Bowser, that's naval for you. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. So we're the bow and they're the arrow, and we can give them direction, but they go off. Simple statements, which you can't really disagree with, but they come from an angle often that, I hadn't thought about it that way. Just to give you another example. Death. You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. So perhaps I was in a vulnerable place in which that kind of statement had an effect. If I'd have read it as a younger man, wouldn't have even considered it. But because I was starting to question life and what's really important, this helped because it kind of shunted me onto rails that I now run on, where I've always taken pride in the fact that I've been a good father and hopefully a good husband. But you don't know until you get like a bedrock under you that helps. And this is where these together really do or have helped me. Might help yourself. And so this book is wonderful because you can just dip into it easily. Because again, each chapter is contained within itself. It's really simple but eloquent language. And it's just a lovely way in which to think or remind yourself of what's really important. Who can depart from his pain and his aloneness without regret? It is not a garment I cast off this day, but a skin that I tear with my own hands. That's when he's leaving. He's shedding his old skin, which I did during the dark night of the soul, to don a new garment. A seeker of silences am I, and what treasure have I found in silences? If this is my day of harvest, in which fields have I sowed the seed, and in what unremembered seasons? What is life if it's not memories? And that's the other thing that I came out of the dark night of the soul with, and coupled with all the books that helped me, those three I've mentioned already, including this. It's the idea that on our deathbed, once we've left this earth, how will we be remembered? I would hazard a guess that we will not be remembered for the houses in which we lived in, or the cars that we drove, even the clothes that we wore, or the position we got at work. We will be remembered for how we made other people feel. I remember people back in my early days that I don't care for because they made me feel small, belittled, bullies, so to speak. I probably was the same. I probably did that for people. I probably was too sarcastic at times. And therefore, the dark night of the soul gets you to focus on that. And then this helps you reinforce what you should be. Because if you can make people think of you fondly and that you were kind and considerate, some would argue, and I've heard it argued, well, they're feminine traits. No, they're human traits. Women are just better at it. And if you want to know about friendship or self-knowledge or pain, it's in here. So The Prophet is one of those little books that you can just sit on a shelf, and when you need to, pick it up and just randomly rifle through it and think, oh yeah, what's this telling me today? Which I often do. And therefore, that's why I wanted to talk about it to camera. But also the fact that books like this have a much stronger resonance if they're meaningful. I might do a video about what makes a good book. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. I think it may be a book tag. What makes a good book? Well, have you ever been in a modern art gallery? When I was doing my art degree, I went in so many. And I realised that I was going through room after room, and even though I was predisposed to love art, I'm an artist myself, and modern art, a lot of it had no effect. So if we think about paintings on paper, on a wall of wallpaper, paper on top of paper, if the artwork has no effect on you, then it might as well be wallpaper. And that's the same with books. If a book has no effect on you, it's not how many books you get through. It's how many books get through to you. And this one, and I would have said before the dark night of the soul, there were many books that affected me. Yeah, but I'm not sure to what extent, really, if I was to admit it. But this one had a real effect. And the other ones that I said I will talk about later. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, Boethius' Consolations of Philosophy. And there, if I put my mind to it, possibly more. So that's the mark of a good book, and I would say that is the mark of why this is a good book. And I don't like saying other books are not good, because, again, what resonates with myself won't necessarily resonate with your good self, and so on. But if it holds true that if it has an effect on you, it could be the telephone directory. Then that's a good book. It has an effect on you. When you lose electricity and you're trying to, in the dark, find the number of the local power company, you realise how important Yellow Pages is, and so on. So, yeah. How many books get through to you? Well, that's one that got through to me. I sense I may have been rambling on this one, so I do apologise. But if you got this far and you've enjoyed it, please leave a comment. Have you ever been through the dark night of the soul? Or anything similar? And if so, what books helped? Thanks for listening.